a most peculiar timeline. I'm going to kind of rapid fire this. As I started looking at the 20th century, I started noticing some peculiar things. Number one, in 1908 AM, or year since creation, we have AM, BC, AD, AM, year since creation, a character shows up in the Bible named Nimrod, whose goal was to create a tower to reach into heaven to kill God. That was his plan. 1908 AM. 1908 AD, a guy named Ernest Shackleton boards a ship called the Nimrod and heads down to Antarctica on the Nimrod expedition. And when those dates got my attention, because I'd already done the Nimrod timeline and some of my prior research. I had done this, quite some time before getting into flat Earth, and had the 1908 number there. And then I see this Nimrod expedition to Antarctica in 1908 AD. I'm going, whoa! And here's the article on that, talking about that journey right there.
The only reason I found out about this was I was actually poking around on Google Earth in Antarctica. I think it's in the Ross Ice Shelf area. And, just kind of looking around, and how on Google Earth, they have the little icons that you could click on, and it pops up pictures, photographs that people have taken in those locations. Well, it just happened that my mouse went over one, and it said the Nimrod hut. I'm like, the Nimrod hut? What? So I click on that, and it zoomed in. They actually had a 360 kind of panorama deal you can zoom in on, and it, opens up, and you can see that whole area. And sure enough, Shackleton went down there on the Nimrod expedition on a ship called the Nimrod, and they set up a Nimrod hut in Antarctica. Yeah.
So Nimrod's born in 1908 AM. He begins to build a tower when he was 42 years of age, and it took 43 years, according to the book of Jubilees, chapter 10, verses 20 through 21. This means that the goal of reaching into heaven to kill God began in the 1950s AM. In the 1950s AD, you have the creation of NASA, and they have effectively tried to kill God as well through their science, saying God's not there. And so this is 1908 AD. About a decade later, in 1918, you have what many have recognized to be the most evil man who has ever lived. The famed occultist Aleister Crowley began a series of magical experiments called the Amelantra workings, in which he is said to have opened a portal to another dimension, allowing an entity, I believe a demon, that he called Lamb, to enter through it. This is a picture that he drew in 1918 of the entity that he encountered. Curious, looks awfully similar to something we might call in pop culture today an alien gray. So that's 1918. More Antarctic expeditions follow. The first men decide to shoot themselves up into the stratosphere, and what do they say? First men to go up 50,000 feet. Yeah, Auguste Piccard. He goes up to 50,000 feet, he looks out and says, man, it looks like a flat disc with an upturned edge. A couple years later, the Russians did the same thing. They went up a little higher. They got to 62,304 feet, just a couple years later. And it said, looking down, these articles are in Popular Science magazine. You can go out and get the magazine, the archive, from the 1930s, and check this out for yourself. And it said, looking down, they tried in vain to detect any curvature of the Earth's horizon. In the 1930s. After World War II, the nations, especially Germany, Russia, and the United States, become obsessed with Antarctica. Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump is 1946 and 47. Meanwhile, elsewhere, you got this character right here, Jack Parsons, who was a disciple of Crowley and the founder of JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He's out there with Scientology guy L. Ron Hubbard in March of 1946 at a location that would later become known as Area 51. They're out there doing this Babylon working, which was part of Amelantra working involving ceremonial sex magic.
During the 1930s and 1940s, the OTO Lodge in California was headed by a brilliant young rocket designer called Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons developed patented rocket technology, which is still in use by NASA to this day. NASA named a crater on the dark side of the moon in honor of Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons worked during the day to develop rocket propulsion systems which would serve NASA's space program. which was controlled by ex-Nazi SS officers such as Werner von Braun, who had been brought to the USA by the CIA's Project Paperclip. At night, Jack Parsons would hold sex magic rituals in his house in Pasadena and initiate fellow scientists at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Laboratory. Jack Parsons was fully aware of what his rocket designs would eventually be used for. Not far from Jack Parsons' rocket lab in Pasadena, Robert Oppenheimer was building the world's first atom bomb, which would be exploded at Los Alamos, near a place called the Road of Death, which lies on the 33rd degree parallel. Once installed as the head of the OTO's American operation, Jack Parsons conducted a giant satanic ritual, aided by a fellow OTO member with the codename Freighter H. In 1948, Jack Parsons undertook one of the most dark rituals known to Kabbalists, the Babylon Working. This ritual requires the initiate to visualize the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, with its 10 spheres and 22 connecting pathways. Between the top 3 spheres and the lower 7 spheres, there is the so-called abyss, the place where one's personality, possibly even one's sanity, is potentially destroyed. If the initiate successfully spans the abyss with personality intact, then he becomes a black brother of the Kabbalah, a black magician of the so-called left-hand path. In the tradition of Judaic mysticism, these black magicians are utter evil and are in themselves pestilence. This giant Babylon working ritual saw Parsons, aided by his magical protege, Freighter H, project their astral bodies into the dark abyss of Lucifer. Parsons took on the ancient Judaic teaching that Christ and his church were the enemy of civilization, and that they had to be destroyed. On a 40-day pilgrimage in the Mojave Desert, the place where Area 51 now resides, Parsons summoned forth Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, the whore of the apocalypse, the consort of the great beast, Satan 666. According to the mysterious Freighter H, during the ritual he saw Parsons rip a hole in space-time, and something evil flew in. So who was the mysterious Freighter H? None other than the author and inventor of the new cult religion of Scientology, Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. Former initiate of Aleister Crowley's OTO, Hubbard wrote a so-called sacred text called Dianetics, which now has an inspired following of evangelical millionaires in Hollywood.
Unlike Crowley, however, according to the story, they were not as adept at opening and closing portals. Crowley supposedly opened one, but he had the power to close them. Apparently, theirs opened, but they were not able to close it. And then we have the modern UFO, everything from Roswell forward, kicking into gear right after that. Now, this is 1947, 1948 time frame when you start talking about, Roswell and stuff like that. Well, recently declassified CIA documents where they were looking into the Russians. This is from 1948, dealing with the science of the Earth. A Russian document translated into English, and you go through that document and you see where it's highlighted there in red that the shape of the Earth is not known to the Russian scientists in 1948. Great video out there Pastor Dean Odle did on a whole bunch of NASA documents. He goes to CIA declassified documents showing consistently them saying, well, all of our math for the high-performance aircraft that we're using is done based on a non-rotating flat Earth.
Government documents admit flat Earth. Now, I had to leave a lot out this morning, so I understand that this is just the tip of the iceberg. But just so everyone knows, those watching, listening, just so everyone knows, I've spent a lot of time digging into this, reading the actual documents, going to the actual CIA website, the Army website, the Navy website, the U.S. Air Force, many NASA documents, Russian documents from Russia that we stole from them during the Cold War. Amazing things that I'm discovering here. This document right here, as most of you will note, where did it come from up top there? The Central Intelligence Agency. Declassified document that we stole from the Russians from 1948. What's that? I wanted you to see that. Scientific Measurements of the Earth, June 1948. It was originally in the Russian language. This is the translated thing. Date distributed, July 1949. Number of pages 19. Just so you can see, here's getting into it here. Now, notice it says, the paper says, outer gravitational field and shape of the physical surface of the Earth. Gives this guy's name, some Russian guy. Center Science Research, Institute for Geodetics, Aerial Surveying and Cartography, Moscow. Everybody see that? All right. You can go through this entire document if you want to. I'm just pulling out something that I found very interesting in 1948 from Russian scientists that was classified. They stated here that where it is not determinable at all of the points of space without the knowledge of the shape of the Earth, but since the shape of the Earth is not known. I'm not going to read all this, because if I read all this today, we'd be here for a long time. In fact, I cut out stuff. I just wanted you to see that a Russian scientific paper that was classified in 1948 states the shape of the Earth is not known. Now, let me remind you that we are always told, oh, we've known the shape of the Earth since 300 BC. How did Russian scientists, and let me just say that Russian scientists are not stupid people. In fact, reading through their documents, they seem to be more honest with themselves than a lot of American scientists. Because the Russians were just trying to figure out all truth so they could gain any kind of advantage over us militarily. All right? Just wanted you to see that, 1948. Here's another document. We move forward in time a little bit, 1956, 57 time period. Now what happened, what happened between about 1948 and this time? The development of jet aircraft and the increase in rocket technology. So we were beginning to be able to fly a little higher, a little faster. So you would think, okay, they know, right? So the Russians started this study, I found out, in the 1940s. They began to study the light within, they said, the firmament. All right? This is their words. The light, but they were doing a light study because they were trying to figure out how they could manipulate or use this knowledge against us with optics and all kinds of stuff. So you see this is released by approved for release 2000, relation between light scattering coefficient for various angles of optical thickness of the atmosphere. Here we go. You can tell when they're older documents. Atmospheric refraction errors for optical instrumentation. Fun reading, folks. I'm telling you, fun reading. There you have it. Tells you technical memorandum, blah, 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 same thing, preliminary report, October 1953. White Sands Proving Ground, La Cruces, New Mexico. This document was not to be seen. This document contains information affecting the national defense of the United States within the meaning of the espionage laws, Title 18 U.S.C., Sections 793 and 794. Its transmission or the revelation of its contents in any manner to an unauthorized person is prohibited by law. So this was classified in the 1950s. He's talking about basic equations for atmospheric refraction and all this stuff. He says, here, now I want to point this out. Present equations hold for any altitude. Everybody see that? I don't have time to read all of it. Present equations hold for any altitude. All right, let's see what they're talking about. Table of contents, introduction, validity of flat earth assumption for atmospheric calculations. Validity. You know what validity means? Something that is a solid fact. And this is the introduction. This is the table of contents, introduction, the validity of flat earth assumption for atmospheric calculations. If it wasn't flat, if the earth was not flat, why would you start off a classified, under threat of law in the Espionage Act, why would you classify that? Introduction here says a comprehensive study of atmospheric refraction errors for optical instrumentation. What is it based on? Based on a flat earth assumption, will be published subsequently. The relative mass of the atmosphere at any elevation angle is given approximately by the cosine of the elevation angle. I may be pronouncing some of this wrong, but listen, this relationship is correct for a flat earth and a flat atmosphere. This relationship is correct for a flat earth and a flat atmosphere. And they're going to publish these results. I just want validity of flat earth assumption. Validity. They're not saying, okay, see what some of them, this is what some of them say, that the flat earth assumption is just to simplify things. But what this is saying is this so-called flat earth assumption is valid. It's valid. Do you see it? Zoom in on it a little bit just so you see it. Validity of flat earth assumption. Just so you know, the definition of validity. The quality of being logically or factually sound. Right? Look at that.
The state of being legally or officially binding. I mean, this could stand in court.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a good point there, Nathan. He said the second part of the definition, the state of being legally or officially binding or acceptable, that this would stand up in court. Here's more of it here. Calculation of light dispersion, higher orders. This is USR, geophysics, light dispersion. This is the study they were doing. Proof presented light dispersion, higher orders can be computed from data obtained in plain direct observation for USSR references. And this is the institution, the Academy of Sciences, USSR Astrophysical Institute. I mean, again, we're not fooling around here with dummies. Right? And this paper, they go on, and again, they go on to tell you the study of the dispersion of light in the Earth's atmosphere, degree, doctoral, physics, math, science, and so they just tell you the whole thing here. Joint Council, March 1957, Academy of Science, USSR. Again, a lot of this I just pulled out just so you would see that these documents are real and what they were about. But let's get to the interesting stuff. Here's all these PhDs and scientists that are involved in this study at this time. Tells you a little more of the introduction, the table of contents. In investigation of light scattering in the Earth's atmosphere, formula for the brightness of the blue sky with consideration of first order scattering and all that, blah, blah, blah. All right. And talks about this first semester, 1957, dissertation, blah, 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 goes through that. Let's get to the interesting meat of this here. Tells you the instruments they use. So right here, it said the observations were carried out in 12 locations at various altitudes above the sea, various climate, meteorological, synoptic conditions. The observations were carried out mainly during high transparency of the atmosphere and the visual range of the spectrum, in the absence of snow cover. In the investigations, 2 instruments designed by V.G. Fescanoff or whatever were used. One of these was a visual photometer of the daytime sky intended for measuring the brightness of the firmament. They were wanting to study this, and they said also the other photoelectric halo photometer for determining the brightness from near sun halo. Whoa. Pause. Time out. Time out. How is something that's supposed to be 93 million miles away, could anything about it be called near? The near sun. Okay? But it gets better. He says that to study the near sun halo and also the sun on the surface perpendicular to these rays. The dissertation contains a certain formula of the brightness of the sky, taking into consideration only the brightness of the first order, derived on the assumption of a flat earth, and giving some conclusions. Because remember, they're trying to study how light is operating within the atmosphere with a near sun halo, and they tell you over flat earth. This is a Russian document, 1957. It was classified. This is a secret eyes only, Central Intelligence Agency declassified 2006, January 16th, 1958. This was a memorandum for the record. This was a meeting. They were talking about things going on in Russia. But this document makes this statement at the end. The shape of the firmament. Do you see that? Whoa. Hold up now. Wow. I think only certain solid things have shape, right? The shape of the firmament. Does everybody see that? You see that? What is a classified document? Classified by the United States government, talking about the shape of the firmament. I can tell them what the shape of it is. Right? But they're talking about this. How does an atmosphere, invisible vapor, how does it have a shape? I mean, you know, when the vapor gas, you know, I'm boiling water, or my wife's making tea, and I don't see any shape to the vapor. But they're talking about, we got to figure out the shape of the firmament. Just like one of the Russian documents talked about, they were measuring the brightness of the firmament. They used that term, the brightness of the firmament over a flat earth. The Russians were talking about this back then. All right? Now let's keep going. Y'all going to love this. This is, what's the website? Everybody look at top there. All right? NASA.gov. April 1961, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Calculation of wind compensation for launching unguided rockets. Pretty serious stuff. Rocket science. Rocket science. Calculating wind. Right? Pretty important thing to know when you're shooting rockets. Just so you see it up close. Calculation of wind compensation for launching unguided rockets. So we're talking about rockets by Robert L. James Jr. and Ronald J. Harris. Langley Research Center, Langley, Virginia. Langley Field. I would say pretty important stuff, right? All right, technical note. Here we go. Summary, method for calculating wind compensation for unguided missiles. It is derived from which has a greater degree of flexibility than previously proposed methods, blah, 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 blah. And they get into it. So they're telling you, summary, here's what we're up to, trying to figure out how to guide rockets. Let's look at this. It says trajectory simulation incorporating the above requirements is presented in reference 8. In addition to the above requirements, this simulation assumes a vehicle with 6 degrees of freedom and aerodynamic symmetry and roll, and the missile position, again, space, we'll deal with that. They don't even, it's not what they're talking about. What we think, what they've told us, and what they know space is, two different things. So when they say it, they don't mean what they've lied about. The missile position in space is computed relative to a flat, non-rotating Earth. April 1961, NASA technical document for calculating unguided missiles, not anything we're sending into space, just unguided missiles like the V-2. was an unguided missile. Let's keep going here. Here's another one. Okay, completely different document. Where did it come from? NASA.gov, right? Unpublished preliminary data, atmospheric oscillations, tells you the people. Georgia Tech project. Under contract, Georgia Tech project, contract, prepared National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So this was in conjunction with their engineers. Engineering Experiment Station, Georgia Institute of Technology, Atlanta, Georgia. Blah, blah, the requirements for additional copies. Talks about that, says the Department of Defense contractors must be established for DDC services or have their need to know certified by the cognizant military agency. So this was not to be passed around. This was need to know. All right. Georgia Tech project, just so you see it. Boom, boom, April 1965. Tells you the abstract, develop present theories of atmospheric oscillations. Blah, blah, blah. I don't have to. All right. A model frequently used is that of, everybody say it, flat, non-rotating Earth. The most one can profitably simplify the problem is to consider the isothermal atmosphere, plane level surfaces, and a non-rotating Earth.
That's it, man. They say flat Earth more than we do.
They say flat Earth more than we do. Now remember, I have shown you documents here, and again, there's so much more. I'm having to trim this down. We're already at 12:15. All right, so I'm trying to get through this, and there's just so much here. But I just wanted you to see. We're talking about 1948, 1957, 1960s, 1970s. Here, everybody see this? NASA technical memorandum. Where did it come from? NASA.gov, right? Declassified. Freedom of Information Act tells you all about it. Determination of angles of attack and side slip from radar data and the roll stabilized platform. Langley researched that. What's in Langley? Virginia? Yeah, CIA headquarters, exactly. Also the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Washington, D.C. Wait a minute, I thought they were in Florida and Houston, Texas. Oh, that's right. I'm sure they have an office. All right, let's keep going here. Here's the abstract. NASA Langley Research Center, technical memorandum, blah, blah, blah. Here is in the abstract. Basically what they're describing this manual is all about. This is a summary of it. Here's what they say. Equations for angles of attack and side slip relative to both rolling and non-rolling body axis system are derived for a flight vehicle for which radar and gyroscope attitude data are available. The method is limited, however, to application where a flat, non-rotating Earth may be assumed. The application for this whole thing has to be based on a flat, non-rotating Earth. Wait a minute, how many documents are we into here? I'm going to read that again. Equations for angles of attack, side slip relative to both rolling and non-rolling body axis system are derived for a flight vehicle. So we're talking about stuff that flies. And for which radar and gyroscope attitude data are available. The method is limited, however, to application where a flat, non-rotating Earth may be assumed. To say that the method is limited to a flat, non-rotating Earth means it does not work for a spherical Earth. Let's keep going. Here we have something else. Is that the same one? I got the same. It's the same manual. Here we go. Let's keep going here. Yes. This is interesting because he talks about, it gives you this little frame reference. Look at north, south, east, west, right? And they're telling you that, again, that represents the Earth fixed axis system. Everybody see that, right there? The radar provides range, azimuth, and elevation data from radar site to the vehicle throughout flight. So we're talking about stuff happening throughout flight, right? The data in conjunction with wind data can be easily converted to pitch, blah, 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 flight path angles. It is assumed herein that the Earth is represented as a flat and non-rotating reference frame. Why would it be assumed that the Earth is represented as a flat, non-rotating reference frame. Exactly. I'm going to tell you, I'm blown away. But this Earth fixed system is interesting here. Why do I say Earth fixed? Isn't it supposed to be spinning, tilted, orbiting, flying through the universe? Yet the stars never change in the sky, right? In the night sky. But yet we're spinning, flying, orbiting. Millions of miles. Been doing it for thousands of years. Nothing in the night sky ever changes. They know. Come on, they know. It is assumed herein that the Earth is represented as a flat, non-rotating reference frame. Yet they're going to tell us snipers have to adjust for shooting a 1,000-yard shot. That takes about 2 seconds. Maybe less than that. But you don't have to calculate the Earth's spin for an aircraft, for a helicopter, a drone.
Right.
The space shuttle, I'll show you that in a minute too.
I brought the drone too.
Let's keep going. Here it is. Notice it says, also by definition, the X and Z plane will be vertical, perpendicular to the horizontal plane of the Earth at all times. The horizontal plane of the Earth at all times. What's this one? This is NASA Technical Memorandum, NASA.gov, mathematical model of a CH-53 helicopter. You guys know a helicopter pilot, right? So here's the NASA manual on that. Ames Research Center, Moffett Field, California. Equations of motion. The helicopter equations of motion are given in body axes with respect to a flat, non-rotating Earth. Meaning the helicopter takes off, it doesn't have to worry about the Earth spinning below it.
You can't stay in one spot and wait on China.
That's right. Can't stay in one spot and wait on China. I love it. Exactly. Now, I'm going to go back to one. This is the first government document. I shared this at the Flat Earth International Conference in Raleigh in my presentation, 2017, last November, that Robbie Davidson put on. I thought this was something to find this document. All right? This is, how little did I know. This was the tip of the iceberg. But this is a NASA technical manual. You can look it up. Anybody out there watching and listening this morning, you can Google NASA document 1207. You can pull up, it'll take you straight to nasa.gov. You can pull up the PDF. You can read this for yourself. This is free information. Right? This is what NASA says. The derivation and definition of a linear aircraft model. In the introduction, they flat out say right here, this report documents the derivation, which means the origin, and the definition of linear aircraft model for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Everybody see that? Derivation means the origin. Definition means this is how it's defined. This is how it works. So they're talking about the equations, and you want to talk about the calculus and trig this thing gets into. The equations are based on these airplanes flying over a non-rotating flat Earth. Question, why would this be in any technical manual of anybody if it doesn't exist? I mean, think about it. They claim the Coriolis effect, that snipers have to calculate the spinning of the Earth, the Coriolis effect, when they're shooting at, a 1,000-yard shot or something. Yet they don't have to for Mach 1, 2, 3, 4 aircraft. You don't have to calculate the spin. No. This is just about, these planes fly over non-rotating flat Earth. So, Pastor Dean, this is what I heard. They're just doing that to simplify the equations. Really? I'm sorry. I didn't know that NASA rocket scientists and MIT mathematicians couldn't factor in 8 inches per mile squared. I'm sorry, they have to simplify the math. Maybe they missed a class at MIT or something. I don't know. But this is crazy. Now you can try to dismiss this if you want to, but it's also in the conclusion, the concluding remarks of the report and all the math and the equations. Look at that. This report derives and defines a set linearized system matrices for rigid aircraft of constant mass flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. I didn't write that. It seems that someone at NASA is a flat earther. Oh my God. Right? How can this be? Now they have to design stuff for it to work the way things are. That's why. Let's keep going here. There's your definition of derivation. Obtaining or developing something from a source of origin. Why would you develop the equations for aircraft to fly over something that doesn't exist? Oh, let's factor in the unicorn equation. Just in case, the Pegasus, the flying horse equation. So, yeah. No, they're telling you it exists. Definition, of course, is a statement of the exact meaning of something. Here's some of my detractors. They talk about the said documents quoted are quote mined and cherry-picked by fraudulent and deceptive flatheads. One example, NASA official document 1207 admits flat Earth. The sad fact is that they don't bother or are too ignorant to read and understand. And what's interesting about this, and of course he goes, these models are widely used not only for computer applications, but also for quick approximations and desk calculations, leaving out Earth curvature and rotation for simplification. So again, I covered that. They're going to claim that it's to simplify their math and equations and their work. So they do it real quick on the desk, but I looked up approximation, and approximation means not really correct, right? So anyway, they write a lot of stuff that's not really correct, but I wanted to address the issue of cherry picking. Of course, the same thing said here pretty much, and let's just deal with this. I actually had to put this on Facebook because it really illustrates the point. Here we have an orange tree with cherries on it. Okay, first of all, that doesn't exist in nature unless it's some kind of, genetic manipulated thing in a lab somewhere. But this doesn't really exist. I said, some people have accused me of cherry picking through the government documents that state their equations are based on a flat, non-rotating Earth. But should there be any flat Earth cherries to pick on a globe Earth orange tree? Should there at all? But they tell me that the cherries are on the orange tree to simplify the orange tree math. Thus, I should ignore the cherries. I just wanted to illustrate that, of course. And there's your globe Earth tree with flat Earth cherries on it to pick. Okay? And really, if it's not flat, why address that? And some of them tried to say, well, okay, it was because of just for short distances. Well, I don't see the shuttle landing over short distances. Even the true thing it's used for, which I'm going to address this morning. I don't see Mach 1, 2, 3, and Mach 4 aircraft like the SR-71. I don't see it being short distances that it covers in very, very short amount of time. All right? So what I'm getting at is that excuse really falls flat. And as I said last week, and I'm going to stand firm on this, the reason that so many different government documents, technical manuals, MIT, different universities, Georgia Tech we addressed, use these flat Earth equations is because it is flat. All right? And they know it, and they've known it for a long time, and they have to design things to work as reality is. Okay? And here was the one that kind of started. This is the title of one of the manuals. Everybody read this with me. Propagation of electromagnetic fields over flat Earth. Army Manual, February 2001. You can say, oh, Pastor Dean, the 1950s stuff and the 1960s stuff, oh, they just didn't know. They've learned stuff since. Right? Nope. They tell you right here. And you go into the manual. Here's the table of context. It says comparison of principal fields from an ideal dipole oriented perpendicular to a horizontal and homogeneous flat Earth. Army manual. They tell you right here, it's assumed that the transmitting antenna and target or receiver are located above but near the surface of a flat idealized Earth. Over and over again. Army Research Laboratory. This is another one, calculating low atmosphere profiles, sound speed at night. So calculating sound speed, right? Pretty important stuff. It says to briefly examine short-range acoustic attenuation at night, we use low atmosphere profiles of wind speed, temperature, relative humidity shown before as input to a flat Earth non-turbulent acoustic propagation model called the Windows version scanning fast field program. So, you know what they tell us? That the atmosphere is not moving with the spin of the Earth. It's non-turbulent. I mean, it's not carrying anything with it. Here's MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the top technical school in the country. Or at least one of the top. I'm sure they argue among themselves who's the top. What's this? dspace.mit.edu. Right? Property-based system design method with application to targeting system for small unmanned vehicles. So this is a targeting system developed Massachusetts Institute of Technology, blah, blah, blah. Tells you who it is, the author of this. And then in the description, it says 3 targeting methods were considered assuming a flat Earth. Whoa, 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 whoa. Why would an MIT professor, PhD, why would he assume the Earth is flat? Assuming a flat Earth. No, he says 3 targeting methods consider assuming a flat Earth using DTED data and using angle range data. The evaluation. I hit it myself. The evaluation revealed a descending utility order, flat Earth, and range based upon the system's requirements. I mean, these and aeronautics and astronautics. Here. Flat Earth assumption, mind blowing. Just wanted you to see MIT and other doctoral candidates and PhDs saying it's flat and it's not moving. That's what the Bible said. It's flat and it's not moving.
We can say it, but you say it, you're crazy.
If I say it, I'm crazy. But these guys can say it, and their papers get passed around among the elite, and a lot of them classified. Yes, and many of them do have Nobel Prize, and they get sometimes they get classified. Right? And then declassified. Here's one. This one is NASA.gov. Now, this is general equations of motion for a damaged asymmetric aircraft. So what they're trying to do is fix equations if a plane loses part of its wing or tail fin or whatever, how to compensate and all that stuff, right? So that's what this is about. And the technical manual gives you this stuff. The introduction. Here's the introduction, right? Just so you know, it says, in order to analyze the dynamics of damaged aircraft, the dynamic equations of motion must properly reflect the underlying physics. Now, I want to say that again. I want everybody to pay close attention. They're telling you right here in the introduction of this, and they're showing you a damaged aircraft. They're saying, in order to analyze the dynamics of damaged aircraft and dynamic equations of motion must properly reflect the underlying physics. It must, what we're going to do here must reflect the true physics.
Must be true reality.
Physics. People say, you don't understand physics. Okay, well, these people do. All right. Who are we talking about here? The American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And here's what they say. Rigid body equations of motion, reference to an arbitrary fixed point on the body. There are several approaches that can be used to develop the general equations of motion. The one selected here starts with Newton's laws applied to the collection of particles defining the rigid body. Any number of dynamics or physics books can serve as references. So they're saying the physics books can serve as references. I said, in this paper, the rigid body equations of motion over a flat, non-rotating Earth are developed. Why? Why? So you're telling me that the physics of a non-rotating flat Earth are the proper physics in a NASA document. This is not Pastor Dean saying this. These are NASA documents. These are government documents. Does everybody see that?
And they're not the same authors.
No. No. Over many years, different schools, the University of Delaware, Georgia Tech, MIT. No. Russian scientists. Now, here's a doctoral dissertation by a PhD candidate that became part of this European Control Conference. In fact, I guess he graduated, but this doctoral dissertation that he began to speak to, I guess, the European Space Agency or whatever, a new path planner based on flatness approach, application to an atmosphere reentry mission. This was designed for the space shuttle, quote, reentry. And it's funny, they put orbit and reentry and stuff like that into quotations. And I'll explain all that next week. We'll get into that next week. But notice the outline of his doctoral dissertation, statement of guidance problem. Why would you have a guidance problem? Well, if you're basing stuff on a spherical Earth and it's really flat, then you're going to have a guidance problem. Right? So this guy comes along and goes, you know what? We got to get back to a flatness approach. I'm not making this up. All right? Flatness-based trajectory planning. Here we go. He's talking about for this little vehicle right here. And we'll keep going. Notice he says model in flat Earth coordinates. Everybody see that? Again, this doesn't exist, right? Flat Earth doesn't exist, but we're going to have a model for it and all this unicorn math. Sprinkled with fairy dust. So this guy's doing a doctoral dissertation in this present time to help with guidance system of the shuttle, and now we have unmanned shuttle system. But he's doing this and saying, we've had guidance problems, so we got to go to a flatness approach, to a flat Earth model. Now, I'm going to tell you, this guy's way smarter than me. I couldn't do this kind of math, not even in my dreams. Okay? But he does. And he says, guys, we need a flat Earth model. And here's the math for it. Shall we keep going? Notice this. Assumptions, meaning things we assume are true. Flat Earth. Coriolis and centrifugal forces neglected.
Don't matter.
Here's a doctoral candidate who graduated, got his PhD, becomes a speaker to the European Control Council. And he's telling them it's a flat Earth. We ignore Coriolis, meaning the spin of the Earth. It's completely ignored. Why? Because it doesn't exist. And it's what the Bible said all along. The earth is fixed, stable, immovable, still, and at rest. Everything secret is being uncovered. Oh, payloads for spinning projectiles. Army. Think you need to know where artillery is going to land? Look here. Projectile flight dynamics. A 6 DOF rigid projectile model is employed to predict the dynamics of a projectile in flight. The assumption of these equations assume a flat Earth. These equations, a whole bunch of math we're going to do. BG Karpov experimental observations of dynamic behavior of liquid-filled shells. U.S. Army Ballistics Research Laboratory, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, August 1961 is a reference to this. But he says, and again, a projectile. You want to know where that artillery round is going to land. And what this study is, the one that has a solid explosive versus one that has a liquid payload. They're talking about chemical weapons or biological weapons. So they want to know, figure out the equations. So a 6 DOF rigid projectile model is employed to predict the dynamics of a projectile in flight. These equations assume a flat Earth. Again, why would you do unicorn math? Why would you do Thor hammer math if they don't exist? Why would you try to calculate ballistic missiles, unguided rockets, shuttle landings? Why would you base all your equations, all of your science on a flat Earth, non-rotating, non-moving, stationary atmosphere if it doesn't exist no more than a unicorn or Thor's hammer? This is the Army Research Laboratory. Notice every time that when you see .mil, whenever you see .mil, in the United States, the only people that can have .mil, military. This is the Army's Research Laboratory. Beacon position and altitude navigation aided by magnetometer. I'm not going to try to pronounce those people's names. You can see the document prepared by the University of Delaware, Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, under contract to the U.S. government. I guess these people are dummies, right? They're stupid, right? This tells you who they are. I'm not going to get into all that, but this tells you the PhDs and the people who were assisting this study. And here we find something. Problem formulation, coordinate systems. The motion of an object usually described by rigid body equations of motion derived from Newton's laws. This section summarizes and notates 3 kinds of coordinate systems. The first is the Earth-fixed coordinate system, which is fixed to the Earth with a flat Earth assumption. Okay, now remember, we're talking about beacons for aircraft, and aircraft flying, moving, and we're talking about stuff that's moving. Why would you assume, first of all, why would you use the term Earth-fixed? I'll deal with that in a second. And a flat Earth assumption. An assumption means something that is just known to be true. It's just assumed because it is known. It gets more interesting because they have a little diagram here of what they're talking about. And this little diagram of the Earth seems to look like something. And they tell you that this y-axis and the x-axis are horizontal. Oh, like that. Horizontal. And that this little disc right here is flat. And it even has a nice little dome over it. And fixed points on the dome that they use for navigation. This is not me. I want to repeat, Army Research Laboratory, .army.mil, not Pastor Dean. And look, does this not look like something maybe we've seen? Oh, what is that? Let me back up. Do you see that? But we're the crazy ones. Why is the biblical Hebrew cosmology shape of the earth in a U.S. Army manual? Why? Oh, Pastor Dean, that's just a coincidence. Oh, really? Well, let's keep going. Look at there. They know the truth. Here we go. This is a different one. Everybody see where this came from? NASA.gov. You could interchange CIA.gov, NASA.gov. It's all the same. Okay? They work together. In fact, I believe that all high-level NASA people are spooks, is what I believe. All right? Here we have the singular arc time optimal climb trajectory of aircraft in a 2-dimensional wind field. Oh, Lord. These guys. All right? NASA research. Smart people. Our rocket scientists. Everybody said, I'm not a rocket scientist. Well, these are. Right? All right? So this document goes on to say, In our minimum time to climb problem, the aircraft is modeled as a point mass, and the flight trajectory is strictly confined in a vertical plane on a non-rotating flat Earth. Do you see that? Does everybody see that? And then they've got this nice little equation here. Thus, the pertinent equations of motion for the problem are defined in its the state variable form as, and then they give you the math. Wait a minute, is this unicorn math? Is this Thor hammer math? Wait a minute, no, it's flat, whoa, what, flat, non-rotating flat Earth math. I'm sorry. Could we just substitute Pegasus, unicorns? No, exactly. Let's keep going. Here's another one. Closed form solution for ballistic vehicle motion. Ballistic vehicle motion. A closed form solution is developed for the motion of a ballistic vehicle entering the atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Frank J. Barbera, Cayman Sciences Corporation, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Closed form solution for ballistic vehicle motion. Meaning we got to know where this thing's going to come down. And what does it say right here? Entering the atmosphere over a non-rotating flat Earth. Let's end this. Here's another one. Vision-based mobile target geolocalization and target discrimination using Bayes detection theory. Oh, it's a mouthful, right? This is a more modern, I can't remember the year on this one, but anyway, you see this is the Academy Center for the United States Air Force, U.S. Air Force Academy, UAS Research, and this is for targeting for unmanned vehicles, unmanned vehicle, aerial vehicles targeting manual. Yes?
And if anyone wants to reach out to the gentleman who wrote the paper, their emails are listed right there.
Oh yeah, this one does have his email on it.
All of them, there's a string of them. Check them out.
Here we go, check it out here. The objective of geolocalization problem is to estimate range to target, which can be estimated using the flat Earth model shown in Figure 2. Now, let me explain something to you. I played a little golf in my day, right? And I know that I hit a 9-iron 160 yards on a normal day. So if the ground is level, I know if I hit my 9-iron the correct way, it's going to fly in a nice little arc, and it's going to land about 160 yards right on the green and roll right up to the hole. Right? I've actually made an eagle that way one time. All right? So I know. So if the ground is 20 yards higher, say the green is 20 yards higher from where I'm standing, so you change the altitude. The ball is not going to fly in the air as long, so it's not going to go as far. So if it's a little higher, I have to go to an 8-iron. Back it up, so because I'm going to hit an 8-iron or even a 7-iron, so the ball will get there. It's the opposite. If it's lower by, say, 20 yards, then I usually have to back up a couple of clubs and maybe hit a pitching wedge. So it changes where where my ball's going to land, the target. I'm shooting at that pin, at that green. But I know just the slight changes in elevation are going to change the distance that my ball will travel. And I've hit enough balls with those clubs to know how far they're going to go if I hit them right. Huh?
And it's not going to land in Georgia.
So we're talking about here unmanned aerial vehicles targeting objects. Stuff that's moving in the air and on the ground. And what do they say? It says the objective of geolocalization problem is to estimate range to target, which can be estimated using the flat Earth model shown in Figure 2, which would be this little thing right here. No curve. Do you notice? The flat Earth model. And your little aerial craft locating a target. Now, if this line was curved here, as it does 8 inches per mile squared, that line is going to intersect at a different point. I'm not a geometry teacher, but that I know. Maybe it's just from golf, right? Flat Earth model, range estimation using flat Earth assumption. Unmanned vehicle targeting manual from ResearchGate, but of course we showed you, United States Air Force Academy. Does everybody see that? Wait a minute. What if I had a flat Earth model on my desk? I'd be called a nut. Crazy. You know what? Maybe the Lord's having me show you, because you know what I think one of the things they're going to try to do to some of us Christians, that if we believe in biblical cosmology and flat Earth, I believe that they're going to try to say we're crazy and try to take our kids away and stuff like that. Having these documents in court would be a powerful tool, wouldn't they?
Interesting. Then we have the MK Ultra project. How many of you guys are familiar with that? You guys know what MK Ultra is? Okay, fair amount of you. It's government-sponsored mind control that takes place from the mid-1950s right through to the end of the Apollo program. Interesting. You know, I've come to wonder if the astronauts may have been possibly MK Ultra'd. They may actually believe they did it. You know, if they were to take a polygraph, maybe they really do believe that they did it. I believe there's more than enough evidence to show that they did not do it, but they could have been, theoretically, MK Ultra'd into believing that they did, in theory anyway. Operation Deep Freeze, 1955 to 56. The nations of the world start going down there, checking out Antarctica. Admiral Byrd's telling the world, yeah, this place is amazing. You know, people go down there. Then things start to change after that operation. We have NASA and DARPA formed in 1958. And again, looking into the history of NASA and the founding of NASA, you start to see how Project Paperclip brings all these Nazi criminals over, and, you know, they're headed up by, forget the guy's first name, I think his last name was Klinkneck, 33rd degree Freemason, heading up NASA. So you got Freemasons and Nazis founding this organization, NASA, and DARPA is created, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This is the black budget super soldier type stuff, you know, Batman type stuff. It's created at the same time, 1958. Now, when I started thinking about NASA, especially after the research I did for my first book, Babylon Rising, I was struck with the Ten Commandments. The first one says, you shall have no other gods before me. Well, what happens when you start looking into NASA, right? All of their missions named after pagan deities, and you start looking through their mission patches, and they're just as bad, full of occult symbols and stuff like that all over the place. You start looking at the various characters that were involved in the beginning and the founding of all that, with Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Werner von Braun, Walt Disney. You start seeing pictures of these guys hanging out with people like Stanley Kubrick. Oh, come on, Rob. Knock it off. Don't be silly. You can trust us. No, I'm not going to trust you. Sorry. Nor am I going to trust the civilian agencies that are coming out, right? Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk. Ooh, there's a Tesla heading to Mars. Yeah. Speaking of that, Elon Musk, right? He's the guy leading the way right now to go to Mars. Well, is it just a coincidence that in the 1950s, Werner von Braun wrote this book, Project Mars, A Technical Tale? And in that book, dealing with colonization of Mars, they say that the leader of the people would be called Elon. Now that's an unusual name, Elon Musk. Is this a coincidence? Werner von Braun writes this book about Mars colonization and it's led by a guy named Elon, written in the 1950s. Antarctic Treaty is signed 59-61. You look into the Antarctic Treaty, you know, they put that together. Taboo Conspiracy did a fantastic video called Antarctica, Sorry We're Closed. Because you always have people say, why don't you just go take a picture of the edge, go take a picture of the firmament, just go down there. Well, he actually goes through the steps in this video to show everything that would be involved, the amount of time and the amount of money that it would take for you to even hope to get approved. And if you did, you're still only going to be allowed to go to very specific places. You can't just go anywhere you want and do whatever you want.
This video is in response to the many globe propagandists who demand that I show a picture of the edge of the flat Earth. For the dozens of these ball-loving zealots with multiple sock puppet accounts who repeat this mantra daily, your demand is ridiculous. But you probably already knew that, right? And that's why you probably keep demanding it. It's actually pretty funny that I just got one of these take a picture comments an hour ago. I'm going to prove in this video that independent travel is not allowed under the Antarctic Treaty System. That fact alone should cause any thinking person to begin questioning our official models. Because something big is being hidden from we, the plebeians, and we're not talking about penguins. For most flat earthers, based on the information that we can reasonably gather, Antarctica constitutes the outer rim of the known world. In other words, Antarctica is likely the shoreline to all of the world's oceans. Like a ring magnet, north constitutes the center of our flat Earth map, and south is every direction away from the northern center. And before I get a dozen comments claiming that such a magnet is impossible, here's a ring magnet shown here. Notice that south is in every direction away from the center north magnetic pole. This is where the 60th south parallel is on a Mercator map. This is the 60th south parallel on a potential flat Earth azimuthal equidistant map. It seems that Antarctica constitutes the circular shore of the known world. So, demanding that I take a picture of a possible edge of the Earth, if any, requires me to not only travel below the 60th south parallel, represented by this circle, but also to cross the entire breadth of Antarctica. According to official numbers, Antarctica has a diameter of roughly 3,400 miles, and so that means our trek will include a long boat ride for hundreds of miles below the 60th south parallel, plus a minimum 6,800-mile round-trip hike across Antarctica. That's assuming the official model is correct. Maybe we could fly to one of the ceremonial pole areas, but that would still leave at least a 3,400-mile hike. In addition, we wouldn't know for sure whether the plane trip itself was interfering with our results, since the pilot would have to follow a designated path outlined by the Antarctic Treaty System, and who truly knows what direction that is until we get there. In order to be fully confident, we would really need to stick to the ground and have control over our own pathway, where we can control our direct southerly route opposite of the northern magnetic pole. Now, whether Antarctica is a smaller continent next to the outer rim, or whether Antarctica is indeed the shoreline of the known world, I don't know the answer. Flat earthers don't have a government budget to spend $1 billion to hire hundreds of cartographers and fleets of boats and planes to map the entire world. But even if flat earthers had the money, we would still run into the Antarctic problem, which is the point of this video. So, what is the Antarctic problem? It is the fact that independent travel is not allowed below the 60th south parallel in any reasonable manner to make any determination as to whether Antarctica is the shoreline boundary circumscribing the known world, or whether Antarctica is simply a continent a little north of the true but unnamed southerly shoreline of the Earth's oceans. For all we know, Antarctica may be an infinite plain that is uninhabitable at further distances. Again, we don't know. But, as I will describe in this video, I suspect that Antarctica is the shoreline circumscribing the known world due to the unbelievable restrictions placed on travel there. Excluding a couple of questionable claims, the total lack of north-south circumnavigation only proves the same. But if I'm not allowed by our governments to independently travel below the 60th south parallel and then to traverse Antarctica over 6,800 miles, then I cannot take a picture of a theoretical edge, dome, or those other lands beyond the South Pole, whatever the case may be. But you probably don't quite grasp how much area is really being blocked off under the Antarctic Treaty System. Let's look at it from the alleged 60th north parallel, because this will give you an idea of the tremendous area blocked off to independent exploration. This is the area of the 60th north parallels. As you can see, the 60th north parallel includes all of northern Canada, Alaska, much of Russia, including St. Petersburg and other major cities, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Greenland. It is huge. Now, why in the world is this much area blocked off at the south? Do you really think it's because of penguins?
You see, first there was just one, now there's thousands of them.
Are they trying to tell us something?
So what's the problem?
Well, among other things, we are messing with their food chain.
And we have got to do something about it.
We suggest a ban on all marine harvesting.
Do you think the child propaganda from Happy Feet is true? The Antarctic Treaty was executed in 1959 and has been in place ever since. Think about it. No country had any real alleged concerns about the environment at that time. One of the more interesting facts is that the Soviet Union also ratified the treaty, and did so from the beginning on December 1st, 1959. Do you really think the Soviets were truly concerned about the penguins and the fragile Antarctic environment? In other words, America, the USSR, and the rest of the major countries of the world remained partners in generally closing Antarctica throughout most of the so-called fake space race, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the fake moon landings, most of the Cold War, the Vietnam War, the Six-Day War, the Soviet-Afghan War, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, which at that time Russia continued as a signatory in 1992. That's some peculiar cooperation transcending international conflicts, don't you think? Do you really think that the vast resources and strategic military benefits of Antarctica were multilaterally put aside because of penguins? Even North Korea has been a signatory since 1987. For some strange reason, the Antarctic Treaty has remained sacrosanct for nearly 60 years, regardless of worldwide conflicts. For the reasonable, objective person, alarm bells should be going off right now. As I was preparing this video, I found something else that's interesting. Out of all the flags of all the countries across the Earth, can you guess which one only shows a map of the country as the emblem of the country? You guessed it. Only one. Antarctica. Yeah, the one country they want you to know the shape of. That doesn't reek of programming, does it? Let me make this clear from the beginning. Travel to Antarctica is more difficult than travel to a military base. Sure, the military base may have a visitor shop near the entrance, but if you go beyond that visitor shop or another designated travel area without clearance, you're going to get arrested, or something worse. I'm sure I already have a few globe shields ready to pounce, armed with various inanities to counter my statement, but let's ignore the global spin. This video is about evidence and facts and the reasonable assumptions based thereon. So let's decide to take a theoretical trip across Antarctica to find the edge, if any. I'm not talking about going to the visitor center along the edge of Antarctica, or an overly expensive cruise to a small ice shelf along the edge with a small excursion, or a flight to one of the multiple ceremonial poles, and then straight back again. Yeah, that's not strange at all. I must reiterate, because I will get a dozen comments telling me to take a cruise or that someone's best friend went to Antarctica. I am not talking about a trip to one of the few designated tourist locations of Antarctica. I'm talking about a real trek, pointed directly south across the entire 3,400-mile breadth of Antarctica and back again to determine whether Antarctica circumscribes the known world and to possibly determine whether there's an edge, a dome, or whatever, and then take a picture of it. I'm talking about repeating the trek of Admiral Byrd and discovering that area as big as the United States that has never been seen by a human being on the other side of the South Pole, full of minerals and such just waiting to be explored.
But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
Okay, let's get started with our theoretical trip. So what is required to trek across the entire breadth of Antarctica? Now, I'm in the United States, and so we're going to examine it from the position of a slave of the U.S. But the rules are going to be the same for all 53 signatory countries of the Antarctic Treaty, and everyone else, since these countries all enforce the same provisions. To begin with, we need to understand that anything below the 60th south parallel is referred to as the Antarctic Treaty Area. What does that mean? That means I'm generally not allowed within hundreds of miles of Antarctica, from approximately 400 to 900 miles, without obtaining a permit to do so. Now, the U.S. government has recorded that some sailors have seen the mountain ranges of Antarctica at 300 miles distance while sailing. Of course, 300 miles should be impossible on the globe with a curvature drop of 11.4 miles, but the 60th parallel is between 400 and 900 miles away from the shoreline of Antarctica. Even under a flat Earth, that's a lot of lower atmosphere to see through, also referred to as atmospheric extinction factor, and a lot of angular size reduction. Despite the claims of the ignorant globe zealots, you can't see through that much lower atmosphere. In other words, I can't even see Antarctica from the ocean without first obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department, or whatever department that controls that in your country. Taking a trip to the 60th South Parallel isn't going to accomplish anything, and so we're stuck with getting a government permit. So let's go through the steps to obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department. This is the handbook of the Antarctic Treaty System. These are the rules that govern all signatories to the treaty. We'll be citing to it regularly as it lays down the rules that govern the Antarctic Treaty beyond the fluff of the treaty language itself. Most importantly, we're going to look at the rules governing non-governmental activities located here, and some of the rules regarding the protection of the environment located here. Now, as a U.S. slave, this is the first form you'll have to submit to get approved to travel to Antarctica. The form itself seems rather innocuous until you understand exactly what is involved in the application process. In summary, Antarctica is treated as a giant natural reserve. Like a military base, all activities and pathways in Antarctica must be approved. This is unlike any other area in the world, except maybe a place like North Korea. So, when I say that no independent travel is allowed below the 60th South Parallel, I'm stating an admitted fact well recorded as international law. The protocol states, as a matter of principle, that all activities are to be planned and conducted on the basis of information sufficient to evaluate their possible impact on the Antarctic environment and its associated ecosystems, and on the value of Antarctica for the conduct of scientific research. Organizers should be aware that the environmental protocol requires that activities shall be modified, suspended, or canceled if they result or threaten to result in impacts upon the Antarctic environment or dependent or associated ecosystems. If you visit Russia, with a Russian visa, for example, are you limited to one particular neighborhood and certain pathways? For those who visit America as a tourist, are you restricted to New York City? Or are you generally allowed to travel around America? No one is just allowed to travel around Antarctica. All of your activities, vehicles, and pathways must be approved, but it gets much worse. Now, how many genuine people watching this video think that the purpose of seeing the edge, the dome, or the extended plain beyond Antarctica would be approved by the U.S. State Department and the other myriad of agencies? Are you ready to litigate the matter when some State Department official arbitrarily says something like, "I think your expedition is frivolous and would be too damaging to the environment, especially in the light of the frivolity of the expedition"? I don't think a court will overturn that decision, especially when treaty law supersedes any rights you may think you have. So, we're going to have to come up with some fake expedition that will somehow get approved. Let's say we're a tree-hugging Luciferian geologist conducting a comprehensive analysis of the global carbon footprint on Antarctica and its flora and fauna. I think that sounds plausible, and so we could hypothetically fake our way in with respect to our purpose, but it will be tricky. Okay, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. This is all theoretical. That brings us to the next point. Entire swaths of land are entirely off limits to all travel. These are called specially protected areas. It's pretty much guaranteed that no one is going to get a permit to go through a specially protected area. If my math is right, that's 1,373 square miles that are allegedly specially protected areas. You can see the maps on the websites, but I don't have time to plot all of them. Now, I agree that's not huge in comparison to the total alleged area of Antarctica. But I believe there's a distinct possibility that those swaths of land could be coordinated in such a way as to prevent me from going through Antarctica easily. So, right from the beginning, my route may be extra hard, especially if mountain pathways are blocked and the areas are much larger than claimed due to likely globe distance shenanigans. But let's go ahead and assume we can navigate around those prohibited, specially protected areas. Next, no motorized equipment is allowed at all for non-governmental personnel. Page 308 states, do not use aircraft, vessels, small boats, or other means of transport in ways that disturb wildlife either at sea or on land. That seems kind of hard and very subjective, doesn't it? Antarctica itself is supposed to have a diameter of 3,400 miles. That means no motorized equipment for at least a 6,800 mile round trip? That sounds pretty damn impossible, right? Especially if Antarctica is much bigger than what is claimed. What about sled dogs? Surely they'll be allowed. What's that? Sled dogs aren't even allowed? Okay, so our trip is now limited to a very long hike in insanely harsh conditions over an extreme rise of elevation. On a side note, Antarctica has the highest average elevation of any alleged continent, but I'm sure that's just coincidence, right? But getting back to our insane trip, we not only have to walk at least 6,800 miles, mostly depending on when we need to turn around, we must also tread extremely lightly as walking on plants in Antarctica is prohibited. I can't damage plants or frighten wildlife on a 6,800 mile journey in a wilderness? I wonder if the Lewis and Clark expedition was limited by such requirements. Good luck traversing 6,800 miles on foot without damaging plants or frightening wildlife with no motorized equipment. I'm not saying that we couldn't figure out a way to get around these big issues, or maybe we could just, theoretically ignore the issues once we get there, but again, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. I'm saying that these are listed enforcement rules under the Antarctic Treaty System. And so think of how easy it would be for one of the many international bureaucrats reviewing our application to deny a permit to trek across Antarctica based on this one plausible excuse. Sorry, you're going to end up walking on plants and scaring birds at least one time during your 6,800 mile journey, and the Antarctic Treaty System prohibits such activities. Application denied. For argument's sake, let's just assume we're going to figure out a way to get around that. Don't ask me how. The next issue is, how are we going to carry all that food and fuel for heat? And don't think that the Antarctic Treaty System isn't concerned with how we store our fuel. The United States itself is roughly 2,500 miles across. So imagine the difficulty of hauling food, climbing at extremely high and unknown elevations, and carrying all of your extremely warm gear and supplies across the United States from coast to coast and back again, all on foot with no food stops along the way. And don't forget, we're going to have to haul our poop as well. You are going to have to drag your poop with you on your 6,800 mile Antarctic hike. But it gets worse. Your poop is regulated by a different pseudo-government agency, the National Science Foundation. Here's where you can learn about what permit is required if you wanted to dispose of your poop on your 6,800 mile journey if you don't want to carry it. Could you imagine for your next trip to France and the custom agent saying, "Welcome to France. By the way, no vehicles are allowed, no animals are allowed, do not walk on any plants, and here's a bag for your poop. Be sure to bring it back full." If you don't want to carry your poop, you're going to have to get a permit from the National Science Foundation. Enjoy your stay. But here's another and potentially bigger problem. What if there is no edge when you get there, but the conditions only get worse? How many years of supplies can one carry by a handheld sled and some skis? What if Antarctica goes beyond 3,400 miles? What then? When do you turn your back, and how do you prove it? Because the globe shows are just going to call you a liar anyways. Any sane person right now would have to admit that our little trip is impossible, but we have a lot of paid-for apologists for our slave masters who will still somehow claim that I'm lying when I say that independent travel in Antarctica is prohibited. But we're not done. Going back to our form DS4131, In addition to disclosure to other parties to the treaty, the information provided may be shared with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to ensure compliance with 40 CFR Part 8 Environmental Impact Assessment of Non-Governmental Activities in Antarctica, as well as with other relevant U.S. agencies. This brings us to one of the most important issues facing us. What is an environmental impact assessment? No country, even North Korea, would ever require an environmental assessment before traveling across their country. It's insane. Here's the definition of an environmental impacts assessment in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. Environmental impact assessment means the environmental review process required by the provisions of this part and by Annex 1 of the Protocol, and includes preparation by the operator and U.S. government review of an environmental document and public access to and circulation of environmental documents to other parties and the Committee on Environmental Protection as required by Annex 1 of the Protocol. Well, let's see what the Committee for Environmental Protection says. Article 8 of the Protocol requires the parties to conduct environmental impact assessments for the Antarctic activities and provides 3 levels of assessment according to the potential impacts of each activity. The procedures for environmental impact assessment are detailed in Annex 1 of the Protocol. If a proposed activity is determined in a preliminary stage of assessment to have less than a minor or transitory impact, it may proceed. If an activity is determined as likely to have a minor or transitory impact, then an initial environmental evaluation must be prepared. If an initial environmental evaluation indicates the potential for more than a minor or transitory impact, or if such impact is otherwise determined to be likely, a comprehensive environmental evaluation must be prepared. Draft CEEs are made publicly available and considered by the CEP, which then advises the ATCM, and that's a Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. Comments provided by other parties in the ATCM must be addressed in a final CEE, which is used as a basis for making a decision about whether and how the activity is conducted. Same law as here. It is the comprehensive environmental evaluation that's going to kill our expedition. Here's the regulation, and this applies to all signatories, including North Korea. Any operator who plans a non-governmental expedition that would require a CEE must submit a draft of the CEE by December 1st of the preceding year. Within 15 days of receipt of the draft CEE, EPA will send it to the Department of State, which will circulate it to all parties to the protocol, and forward it to the Committee for Environmental Protection established by the protocol, and publish notice of receipt of the CEE and request for comments on the CEE in the Federal Register, and will provide copies to any person upon request. The EPA will accept public comments on the CEE for a period of 90 days following notice in the Federal Register. The EPA, in consultation with other interested federal agencies, will evaluate the CEE to determine if the CEE meets the requirements under Article 8, Annex 1 to the Protocol and the provisions of this part, and will transmit its comments to the operator within 120 days following publication in the Federal Register of the notice of availability of the CEE. So, now, I'm sure most of you probably just went brain dead when I read that, so let me explain it. First, our CEE, that's our Comprehensive Environmental Evaluation, must pass the EPA's initial review. Not an easy task. Next, the Department of State, along with its Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs Bureau of Oceans, Environment, and Science, must review it. Next, it will be sent to all parties. That's 100 countries, by the way. Next, your assessment must be approved by an international bureaucracy called the Committee for Environmental Protection. After their highly unlikely approval, the EPA will then publish it in the United States Federal Register. Now, why would they do that? Because any supposed private tree-hugging group can now sue to stop you from going there. Once that is done, assuming you haven't been sued, then the EPA, along with all of the other interested federal agency, whatever the hell that means, evaluates it again. Do you realize the amount of legal work this would entail? Do you realize how easy it would be for any one of hundreds of entities or thousands of bureaucrats to halt your expedition? Again, this applies to all countries. One person in the comments of my last Antarctic video claimed that it wasn't necessary in the United Kingdom. Well, he lied. The Environmental or Madrid Protocol is part of the Antarctic Treaty System and applies to all countries. Here is the requirement on the UK application if you're interested. As explained above, for every person in the United States who wants to get a permit to travel across Antarctica has to first submit the environmental impact assessment to the EPA. You know, the freedom-loving EPA.
Beware! Beware! Time is short! EPA! 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 Believe me! Believe me! Thanks for listening.
Lost them, sir.
Well, then you find them, and you get them back in the dome. And to make sure nobody else gets out, I want roving death squads around the perimeter 24/7.
Do you know what the environmental impact statement costs? This is very similar. A typical environmental impact statement costs from $250,000 to $2 million. And those are a lot easier than this comprehensive environmental analysis required under the Antarctic Treaty. For us, the biggest problem is that you would have to incur the expense of the environmental impact assessment before you know if you're denied, due to whatever arbitrary claim a bureaucrat can think of. Do you see how difficult this environmental assessment will be? How would one know the environmental impact on an area which you've never been to, and very little information would be available? With a normal environmental assessment, you'd be able to send an engineering firm to the location to make the assessment with attorneys who would draft the statement. In this case, you can't send an engineering firm all the way to Antarctica, and so you have to hire Antarctic experts who have been to the same places you're planning on walking through. Now, how many of those do you think there are? I say that we can safely assume that the price of getting an environmental impacts assessment approved by the EPA and the international agency would cost millions, assuming no supposed private group sues you once it's published in the Federal Register. Do you have more than $2 million to spend for an environmental impact assessment? And then, what if the EPA or the Committee for Environmental Protection or one of the other agencies says no? Maybe that not enough information was provided. Are you ready to spend another $2 million to fight that in court? But you still have to have your purpose approved. Do you see the problem there? You would likely spend millions on getting the environmental impact statement, only later to have some official at the International Committee for Environmental Protection reject your purpose in Antarctica. You would truly gamble millions in this silly endeavor. To learn more about the environmental assessment procedures with the Committee for Environmental Protection, you can research it here. See also, let's get to the final issue we're going to run into. 7 countries claim territorial rights to various parts of Antarctica. Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom all maintain territorial claims in Antarctica. I did find it interesting that the USSR never claimed territorial rights to Antarctica. Yeah. I'm willing to bet that my trip across Antarctica is going to need other permits from other countries based only on territorial claims. Getting more permits or visas from other countries who have alleged territory in Antarctica? Yeah, that shouldn't add too much to our already strained budget. Now, just for the propagandist who's going to claim that's not true, I quote, "The Antarctic Treaty puts aside the potential for conflict over sovereignty for providing that nothing that occurs while the treaty is enforced will enhance or diminish territorial claims." Meaning, the territorial claims trump.
Then after that, we have the dig race, the missile race, and the space race. And I have 20 minutes left. I wonder if I can race through this. 1961 to 92. Yeah, I'm going to try. Okay. In the Bible, the earth is consistently described by Holy Spirit-inspired authors as being fixed, not moving, spinning, orbiting, etc. Circular, with edges, corners, pillars, foundations, etc. Under a dome within which the sun, moon, and stars were placed on day 4. I'm going to go through all this tomorrow in some detail. Now, this is not thus saith the Lord. This is thus thinketh Rob. Okay? This is just an artist's rendition. In this case, me, I'm the artist. My artist conceptualization of what I think when I read the scriptures and other ancient texts. This is what I came up with. And inside of that structure, you have, this basic structure right here. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. This is what I imagine the ancient texts are telling us that we're living in. There's an interesting scripture about the prophet Enoch, pre-flood. Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. The book of Joshua goes into a little bit more detail, explains why he was considered worthy to be taken away. and he disappeared in a place full of snow and ice. And I started thinking, wait a minute, Enoch ascended into heaven and went to a place filled with snow and ice? And you start thinking about depictions like this, where you just Google coastline of Antarctica, right? You see pictures like that, and then you artist renditions of a prophet peeking under the dome. Is that what was going on in Antarctica? Is that why they went down there? What did they find? Well, they engage in three things: a dig race, a missile race, and a space race. We're going to play a video again.
Now, with the tinfoil hat on, playing conspiracy theory here, it looks like, at least from the flat earther perspective, that probably during Operation Deep Freeze, they may have found the edge of the dome, presumably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast. So let's just do a quick recap here. 1, everyone becomes obsessed with Antarctica in the late 40s and late 50s. 2, everyone leaves Antarctica to draft up a treaty which would prohibit anyone from going there except under the express strict guidelines of the treaty. 3, the United States creates NASA and DARPA, you know, that organization which creates black budget projects for the military and other agencies and other groups. 4, the United States and Russia start blowing up the sky. 5, the United States and Russia become obsessed with what's above us in space. 6, the United States and Russia become obsessed with what's beneath us.
Several decades ago, two countries, America and Russia, raced to drill the deepest hole into the Earth with the goal of discovering what was at its core. Both projects were massive undertakings, and the world was fixated on what mysteries they'd find beneath the surface. Russia's efforts resulted in something called the Kola Super Deep Borehole, and when you see it, you might have to pick your jaw up off the floor. Both countries drilled boreholes deep into the ground until they couldn't go any further. They used enormous metal contraptions that were designed to break through even the toughest material. The world watched in awe as the Americans kicked off the race. The enormous drills were fired up, and everyone hoped the project would go according to plan. What kind of mysteries would the drillers find, if any? The United States called the endeavor Project Mohole, and they began their drilling off the Pacific coast of Mexico in 1961. This would be a massive effort with global interests, and there was a lot riding on the team's work.
You guys starting to see the timeline here? 1961.
Unfortunately, soon after the project began, it was abandoned due to lack of funding.
Lack of funding because they decided to put all their funding into going to Antarctica looking for moon rocks and faking the whole world with the moon landings.
Almost a decade later, the Russians had organized their own drilling team and began their quest to reach the center of the Earth. On May 24th, 1970, they set their sights on the Kola Peninsula. The Russians called their endeavor the Kola Super Deep Borehole. The end goal of the drilling project was to reach a depth of 49,000 feet into the Earth's crust. The race to the center of the Earth was an exciting and intriguing time for the world. In the end, the goal was never reached, but at least the scientific community benefited from the efforts. Though defunct, this phenomenal structure still stands as a reminder of one project that had the world on the edge of its seat.
Okay, so they didn't get to 49,000. They only got to something like, I think he said 40,200 or something like that, which is less than 8 miles.
Even the deepest drilled hole is still some 3,955 miles short of the center of the Earth. Barely a pinprick on the surface of our planet.
So we have all these pictures in the textbook about the center of the Earth and what the core of the Earth and everything else looks like. And they're going to say, all right, it's all fiction about the inner Earth and hollow Earth, all that stuff, when they have never even gone deeper than 8 miles. It's unbelievable. We have been lied to with artwork, pictures, paintings, drawings, CGI. Everything about our Earth and everything about space. Artwork. And oh, by the way, you know, okay, we're in a race, right? And we supposedly beat Russia in the space race, whatever that means. You know, we did something more than or faster or whatever. Who cares? They just gave up? Really? They just gave up? I quit. I'm going home. No, they didn't give up. They sent dozens of missions to Antarctica while we were doing the Apollo program. Let that sink in. Okay. I got to say, it sure looks to me like they found something in Antarctica which challenged everything we thought we knew, and thus they immediately set out to find how high our enclosed world dome is and how deep the foundation goes. That's exactly what somebody would do if they discovered they were in a cage. They try to figure out how, wait a minute, what are the boundaries? How do I get out of here? That's exactly all of the activities that the United States and Russia in particular engaged in immediately after Operation Deep Freeze all points to exactly that. I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion. They started acting exactly like people stuck in a cage. They started immediately trying to figure out the boundaries. That's exactly what they would do. So it appears that whatever happened in Antarctica, everybody got kind of maybe nervous or excited or whatever and said, okay, what is the deal? You know, we've looked through telescopes. We've seen our so-called neighbors, Venus and Mars, through telescopes. Our assumption is the solar system is, you know, set up in the Copernican model. And, but yet maybe they found a dome and they started to question all that. So the first thing they do is send out probes to go, wait a minute, what in the world? If we're in a dome, how high does this thing go? So they start launching high altitude nuclear bombs. And if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. I mean, at least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. You can read more on all that if you'd like, to get caught up to speed on what's going on there. So I go to Lubbock, and I'm doing this conference out there at Jared Cressman's father's church, Pastor Dan Cressman, and we get to talking about this whole issue of the flat Earth stuff. And he goes, "Do you know what the name Dominic means?" And I said, "No." He says, "You know, you talk about Operation Fishbowl, but check this out. I'm going to take you to, I'll put the screen share back up here. Take you to a one of those name websites. I like using behindthename.com. Look up the name Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C, from the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high-altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e., the firmament." Yeah, this is definitely one of those things to make you go, Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and we'll see you back next time.